I'm Huples Cat. Welcome to the third video on this excellent book that we're looking at. And this video we're going to look at the middle part of chapter 2 on urban survival. For those following along, we resume on page 56 and we're going to halt round about page 95. In terms of crimes, it's the same in SHTF as it is in now, except there's probably no law around. Try not to give the desire or the opportunity to criminals to victimise you. Dress like everybody else but somewhat poorer. Don't flaunt wealth. Look at your wristwatch. Do you need to wear that? Do you have gold chains on? Do you have a gold wedding ring? Now, Selco and Cowern appear not to like lone wolf survivalists, and I agree with them. He found that during the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s, people who were lone wolves died easily. He is correct. Have a local network. You will have to sleep. When you're sleeping, you're vulnerable. Have decent locks and doors. But remember, locks only keep out innocent people. If they get in, will they find a few old tins and a cold home, or a stove, wood, and loads of food? Think like a criminal. What do you have that they would take? What do you have they would kill to get? For me, I always assume the home itself will be compromised and hide and store things outside of it. Cook outside the home as well in mobile locations if it's safe to do so. Remember, cooking smells can travel about a mile. Of course, Selco experienced a siege and he had snipers shooting at anybody on the street during daylight. Now, we don't probably have to deal with that in any SHTF we face, though you never know. However, for very many reasons, cooking outside of the home in SHTF is probably the ideal thing to do. And using mobile locations, really smart. On page 59 he says that in most SHTF scenarios there will be violence and looting. Yeah, to some degree. Simply make your place look like it's already been looted and destroyed. Use some fake or animal blood on your porch, break a few windows, take some stuff out and just throw it everywhere on your lawn. Make it look like it's not worth bothering with. Consider burning parts of your place that you don't need. Make sure your house blends in with the neighbours' houses or looks worse. In a full societal collapse, none of these measures are actually going to stop anybody scavenging around your buildings. When desperation seeps into everybody's pores, nothing is going to get overlooked. He suggests many good ideas to fortify the home, and rightly says burglar bars and grills over windows will kill you in a fire event, and it's much more likely for you to experience a fire event than a home invasion. On page 66 they talk about hiding preps. Consider space in your house or apartment where things can be hidden, such as air vents, fake power outlets, underfloor tiles or upon the ceiling. You can often remove dropped ceiling tiles and hide something in the space between them. Install identical items with hidden supplies in them next to items that are actually used, e.g. pipes filled with supplies next to real water pipes. This is great, but in a full collapse, try and have lots of little supplies scattered around the area. Centering it on your home may not be the best bet. On pages 67 and 68, like most preppers, he talks in detail about perimeter defence. This is the idea of having a fortified home or bug out location, having things to slow down or even hinder people getting in, and then killing them if they try and get in. This is absolute fantasy. Try not to prep like this. It's really not a good idea. On pages 64 and 65 he gives great ideas about what to do. If you see someone in your yard, do not confront him. It's always a him, eh? Women are dangerous as well as men in SHTF. Call the police and stay in the house so the police do not mistake you for the potential attacker. This is specifically important if you're in the United States of America and you're not white. If you suspect the threat is already in your house, do not go looking for him. Again, could be a woman, and why is it a solo person? Try to retreat to a safe room. Keep the room locked and wait for help to arrive. If you wake up with an intruder in your room, do not freak out and panic. Pretend you are asleep. If he heads your way, you can still surprise him. Hopefully he will just pass through looking for valuables. That's advice for normal times, and it's good advice. On page 68 they talk about staying hidden once SHTF happens. Think about alternative ways of entering and leaving your house without being seen. It can be a back door, basement window, or even maybe a small tunnel leading to a bush nearby. It can also be a simple hole in the wall hidden from outside with some bushes or junk. This is great advice, especially if there's been a lot of building damage. Consider the fact that if you move around and go on a specific trail over and over, you will leave a trail sign. I don't care how careful you are at it, you really want to make sure people don't follow your trails. Try not to make them. On page 69 he talks about leaving poison around, so if people do loot you, they'll take the poison and be sick or even die. He talks about the problems with that because you could poison yourself or your family. He also talks about using natural plants that can deter creatures from eating them. Every year you also hear about people picking mushrooms and killing themselves accidentally. Yeah, and in SHTF with a full societal collapse, you're going to be picking mushrooms, so be prepared to do so. Normalcy bias says that we can't do that because it's very dangerous. It's not very dangerous, but it is dangerous. So you need to know how to pick mushrooms, how to identify mushrooms, how to test mushrooms, and how to eat them. Because honestly, in full societal collapse after a few months, you'll eat anything, and it's best if you eat safely. Selco's strong message is survive. Supplies can be discarded and collected again. Maybe your life cannot be. That is for sure true. Of course, if you're a Christian, you don't actually mind dying because then you go to heaven and you're with the baby Jesus. But as an atheist, I don't want to die. Do not prioritise anything over your own personal survival. On page 70, they talk about sanitation. Collect waste away from your home and water sources. Do not burn trash. It is toxic. I would argue in a full societal collapse that's ongoing, there is no trash, and any trash that you've buried or left anywhere, you're actually going to pick through it later on and see what you can get useful out of it, whether it's paper to write on or metal to make implements out of. In the book they talk about building a pit latrine if your toilets fail. I'd actually build this earlier on if you know it's a full societal collapse. You don't want to have to hold it in while you're digging. What you need to do is always collect feces separate from urine as far as possible. That's going to decrease smell. I suggest you look at a channel called Old School Prepper for this. She's got some great ideas about how to use urine. Basically be dumped anywhere away from a water source. You can use it on the garden. On page 70, one thing that every survivalist needs in great numbers is garbage bags. They are very cheap but can be used for a variety of purposes. What I think is missing from this section is have a lot of hard soap and also have lots of linen clothes for toilet paper and bandages. Hygiene is very critical but often overlooked. They talk about typical attacks, and basically what people were doing were just throwing grenades or bazookas into homes and blowing the home up and then going in and having a look. It was not like in the movies. It's not like the Americans imagine it to be. You're defending your home. Next thing you know, your home has been hit with 4 grenades and some Molotov cocktails. Deal with it. This is why mobility and hiding and spreading stuff out is so critical. What do you think is more important, carrying the right gear with you or moving at speed? Hello everybody, Huples Cat. So I was making up my bug out back using all the videos online, and a couple of things wrong with it. First off, I couldn't put my toolkit in. Second off, my cordage and my fire started. And I don't have any food. So I think basically, as a design for a bug out bag, this is kind of, it needs to be rethought. Anyway, that's Huples Cat. Au revoir, pray for me. And so, on page 73, Selco shows how he and his small group moved around. Some great tips in this section. Whatever you learned in the service isn't really probably going to serve you well in this scenario. Selco found that speed is very important compared to anything else, definitely compared to carrying bulky, heavy combat gear. If there's 2 or more in your group, at all times one person is watching 360 at all times. If you have more than that moving, you want to really spread out and consider how many of you are moving and how safe it is, and you'd have somebody at the front and back doing the same thing. There's only one of you, which is most likely for most of us most of the time. Stop, look, listen randomly and often. That's what I suggest. Wear strong and sturdy boots, but Selco, like me, prefers trail runners because of the weight and the ease of use. That's fascinating. So the advice is to have strong and sturdy boots, but Selco actually uses trail runners like I do. If you're happy wearing strong and sturdy boots and can run fast in them for a long time, knock yourself out. At night you have a blind spot. It's actually right in the centre of your vision. You have to move your head very slowly and often. Don't do quick head movements. Pay attention to your peripheral vision. It's much more reliable at night than your straight frontal vision. Again, practice this before your life depends on it. One of the major strengths of this book for me are the tip sections, and again on page 76. At night, if there's any light at all, try and avoid wearing totally black clothing. Use dark blues and greens. Colours are hardly seen in low light environments, but wearing a pitch black can still make you stand out at night because most dark areas are not completely black. That's why blue, grey or moss green colours are often preferred for urban camouflage. And again, if it's safe to do so, train before SHTF wherever you can and however you can. One of the brilliant ideas on page 76 is focus on why you're there and why you're moving through that area. Do not be curious. The outside is always presenting a danger to you. Again on page 77 there's lots of tips, and I will tell you one thing that's brilliant here. Also keep in mind that other people act to protect their houses as well, or might even hide to ambush you. Whenever I was not sure other people were around, I waited for 10 to 20 minutes to try and see any signs of movements. Get used to crawling and hiding in dirty and unpleasant places. This is not pleasant, but much better than being spotted if you don't want to be seen. People stop for about 15 to 20 seconds and listen, don't hear anything, and then carry on walking. Don't be that person. Very quietly move off the trail, secure yourself, and sit there for 5 to 10 to 15 minutes and listen and look.
You can see the northern part of the road quite clearly from here. Nobody on it, but I can hear traffic. And traffic noise is one of the things you'll hear, so you can avoid it. Low profile, don't look like a human being. You'll notice I'm using height. Use natural cover, be quiet, listen, think, look.
On page 78, we're going to confront a new reality. Although this might seem paranoid, Selco Cowern actually have a point. How far you take this is up to you, and it depends on the circumstances and where you are and what is going on. Trust no one. The police, military, etc. are actually now a threat if the rule of law has collapsed. And to that one I always add, trust no one, especially not yourself. Be very careful about acting on instinct. Neighbours are going to be allies or threats when desperate. In this binary world of prepping, this is probably true. In reality, in the new reality, in my opinion, neighbours are going to be allies or threats, or both, or neither. Most of them are going to be neither. Prepping, trying to get a prepper group together around you. My advice has always been, avoid talking about it. Post SHTF, they will remember you. They're going to come begging for food. They're going to try and kill you to get you food. Remember that. Neighbours who are threats need a very thorough risk assessment. How dangerous are they? I go beyond that. What I'm saying to you is, when do they get up? When do they go to bed? What are their normal patterns of behaviour? When are they most active? Write down all assessments, list threats in order and deal with them. Well, I don't know if you need to go that far. It depends on how many threats you have. On page 80, they talk about creating a trust ranking list of your neighbours. This is really going too far for me. And at this section, the book really panders to extreme right-wing ideology. For example, quoting on page 80, for example, if you have a neighbour who is a bank clerk with a wife and 3 kids, drives a car with a bumper sticker that says ban firearms, is a slave to TV and the mainstream media, most probably he will not be your most dangerous guy in the neighbourhood. He might be desperate early on, but does not have the means, weapons and being used to being violent to be a major threat. He could actually be a really good ally. He might have been prepping for a long time and you don't know it. He might spend all his vacations actually doing extreme camping. You don't know. You need to really understand people. Most people are not going to tear your throat out as soon as the bomb goes off. Selco Cowern cover quite a bit on looting. The section starts on page 85. However, on page 81 there's actually a section called Selco on finding things in the neighbourhood. Page 82, we do not encourage you to loot, but if you need some things to survive and have to take them to save your life, it makes sense to be clear about your priorities. Don't loot unless you have to, and when that's the case, it's always a personal decision. Like me, he recommends hitting abandoned houses in the neighbourhood. He points out if society's collapsed, don't go for the big TV and the Ferrari. Go for medications, go for food, go for water, go for ammunition and weapons. Now, in my opinion, as famine increases, it's going to get easier and easier for people to make the decision to loot. So what you should do is loot early on, very early on if it's safe to do so. If there are abandoned cottages in the area, get in there fast, take the stuff. Be wary of leaving tracks, you don't want the owners to show up and find you. In terms of resources, when you go into a place, take everything, not just the guns and food. Take anything useful. For example, you're going to take batteries. But what about white linen sheets that you can use for bandages? Do they have any pet medications? Can you take them and look them up? Could they be useful to you later on down the line? Have a good think. In my opinion, you're going to loot abandoned houses early on. Cottages, food, fishing, hunting gear, fire starting gear. These are gold mines, especially the rich ones. Hit them very early. And I am talking here about the end of society, not an ice storm. On page 83 and 84, before we get to looting, it talks about hiding stuff. Hiding stuff in septic tanks, hiding stuff where people aren't going to root through and find it. This is a good idea. The one thing I would actually take issue with is he mentions everything to loot, and it's a comprehensive list on page 83, but he doesn't actually mention car batteries. If you can, take as many car batteries as possible. Selco Cowern's first rule for adapting to this new reality is to forget about old times and old rules. Page 85, quote, first you need to recognise the moment when SHTF and there is no more law. When you hide things, think about how you're going to retrieve it without being spotted. Think about how much stuff's there. If you've got a huge amount of stuff in one area, the chance of it being found really dramatically increases. Lots of tiny caches all over the spot, really well hidden, and hidden in ways that are unattractive for people to actually look, however desperate. Cash is not likely to be king anymore. You don't need a lot of cash, but some cash in the very early phase of SHTF is a really good idea, but it's not going to work very long once society's fallen. A BIC is cheap and disposable. A working one 5 years after societal collapse will be priceless. The same with antibiotics and blade sharpeners. Think about what you're bartering if you want to barter, and I don't advise you ever do so. Everyone is in the now because of the SHTF and the collapse of society. Nobody's thinking of the future. You be the one dude who actually thinks, a year or two from now, BICs are going to be priceless. Selco honestly states that he looted a PC, not food initially. At the time, no one thought that TV stereos, PCs would become utterly worthless once the food ran out. And that's something you need to bear in mind. What is valuable now will not be valuable 3 months into a full societal collapse. Selco now says you should go to hardware stores and pharmacies very early on, but in my opinion you've got to be really careful of junkies if you go into pharmacies. My advice has always been a little bit differently. I say hit pet stores and vets. You can eat and enjoy dog and cat kibble. The meat's a bit tougher to take, but vets will have a lot of heavy duty pain meds and antibiotics and medical gear. Loot only if abandoned. If it's not abandoned, try to get that vet into your network. If it's early on in SHTF, using cash, buy dog kibble. The section on trading is a rare gem in prepping terms. What they tell you to do, and I agree, is expect to be robbed, defrauded and conned as resources decrease. But it's interesting what Selco experienced in the 1990s. Candles are very cheap now, but after an SHTF event, candles become very valuable and people want them and people will barter a lot of food for them. Then their value starts to drop, as blazing nightlight needs to drop as well because SHTF hasn't stopped and it's ongoing. If you can, get and keep antibiotics. If it's early on and people are trading antibiotics, these are gold. Get as many as you safely can. Alcohol also is very valuable early on, but again this decreases as people figured out how to make their own. One of the things Selco warns about is fake medicines. Yeah, like horse dewormer. But people actually started to barter and trade stuff to fix illnesses because there's no medicine anymore. So people started to use snake oil again, literally. What he doesn't mention is people adulterating flour and wheat. People adding chemicals to stuff to make it more bulky or heavier or more of it so they can barter more of it for your gear. Be very careful. Generally speaking, try not to barter with anybody unless they're personal friends. Now, one of the things I've actually focused on for the last 5 years is skills. Bartering skills is pretty good. Nobody's going to usually cheat you if you have a skill that they need later on as well. For example, the skills I have: chimney cleaning, medical, nursing, and even education. Society has to get going again. Are you a welder? Do you do blacksmithing? Maybe that's portable. Maybe you can use it after SHTF. Think about it. Those types of skills initially are absolutely useless, but a year or two later, valuable. What we do know from World War I and World War II and pretty much every single disaster that's ever happened is the two products that become valuable early on and hold value: coffee and foreign cigarettes. In World War II, to get antibiotics to treat syphilis in 1945 in Germany after the fall of the Reich, it cost 2 packets of coffee. Didn't matter how much money you had, people wanted coffee and cigarettes initially. That's what they wanted, and that's what actually became effectively currency. Now, I won't be trading coffee with anybody because I happen to like coffee. Now, if you are going to trade in small things and in small amounts. Be careful. Don't do repeat trading in the same place. Be careful not to get greedy. Once you get greedy, you're in trouble. You only have 3 Bics. They offer tin fruit for more. Can you get more? I'll give you more of this. Sorry, walk away. Greed will get you followed and killed. Do not cheat, fraud, con or lie. People will get angry. Trade in an established hub, not at home or your bug out location. Well, thank you. We're now 2/3 of the way through Chapter 2, Urban Survival. Next video we're going to talk about the stages of collapse. We're going to talk about the types of people in an SHTF and building a group to survive. Bob, a bug out bag, is also covered. It's kind of amusing because on page 107 he's going to call it butt out bags. And there's a huge section on bugging out from urban areas, as you might expect, and a lot of it I don't agree with, but we'll have some fun going through it before we get to the most amusing chapter, which is going to be Chapter 3, Wilderness Survival. Thanks for watching. Toodles. This has been a Fat Cat and Wolfie Terrier production 2025.